So we're just going to walk through the night. You and I were both working that night. What I recall sitting in the newsroom was, we had one of the big monitors up there, was calm, peaceful protest. And then I remember looking up at the monitor and seeing people. I hadn't heard a thing.
Yeah.
I looked up at a monitor and I saw probably 100 people running, almost like a full-out sprint. Describe for me on your end of things what it was like before everything started happening. Was it quiet?
Well, like you said, I wouldn't describe it as quiet. There was a lot of energy, and it was a very energized event that took place down there. But it was also very calm in the sense that there was nothing out of the ordinary going on. It's what you expected the people to do. I mean,
We've covered 100 of them, right?
It was a textbook.
Peaceful, respectful.
Very peaceful, very respectful. The police officers that were down there were doing their job in keeping, the crowds where they needed to be. So everything was textbook.
Right.
I wouldn't call it quiet because,
Right.
these folks are very vocal.
Voicing their opposition.
And it was very energized. And so I remember saying to myself, okay, well, I can see that this is now coming to an end, because we were making the big circle and we were getting back to Belo Park where all of this started. We weren't too far from it. And that's when what you described, what you saw, I saw the same thing from the ground level, people just scattering.
So I'm curious, the moment something was different for you, was it something you heard or was it something you saw? Saw.
At first, what I saw was the crowds scattering. Because we were in the crowds, we were with them. We were about midway down the pack. So the people up ahead, I could see them start scattering in all directions. And I didn't know what caused that. I thought initially that perhaps there was a car that had run over some people, that had ignored some of the police officers' orders to, block off the streets and decided they wanted to just kind of mow down some of the protesters. That's what I thought. That was the first, I don't know why I had that thought, but that's what I thought happened. Because I didn't really hear anything. I just saw the people scattering, and some people at that point, they had already been trampled, so they were kind of on the ground, and maybe that's why I thought that. As soon as that happened, I started pacing forward as fast as I could to get a closer look of what was going on. And as I was running forward, I realized that this time I was also sort of getting away from my photographer, which in hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. But I started kind of running towards where the commotion was happening, and at that point, I heard the barrage of the gunfire, and then there was no mistaking what was going on at that point. I mean,
how many shots did you hear?
Doug, it was dozens. It was dozens, and I knew immediately that it was gunshots.
It was not fireworks.
I didn't think it was fireworks. I didn't think it was a car backfiring. I mean, I knew it was gunfire. Yeah. It was a lot of it, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know where it's coming from. I knew that it was nearby, because I could hear it, but the way that the buildings are laid out in downtown, it kind of creates sort of a sound tunnel, if you will. So that
a ricochet of sound almost, right?
Exactly. That sound was bouncing off of the walls and the buildings out there, and it kind of sounded like it was all around you. You couldn't really tell where it was coming from. At that point, a lot of the people had already sort of cleared the street. I looked behind me when I realized that I had left my photographer. Thankfully, he wasn't too far behind me. I looked back and I found Ed. He was a few steps behind me. He was behind a light post, at which point I grabbed him and I said, hey, we need to get out from the street, because at that point we were in the middle of the street. So we took the nearest wall that we could find, right on Commerce, right in front of what the garage, the parking garage. We thought initially that's where the shooter was at. And we got up to that wall, and I said to him, turn the live view on. We're going to need to go live. And soon after that, we were talking to you live on the air. And you saw it,
Yeah, I was going to say,
from that point on.
I remember the first time talking to you. I remember the wall you're describing.
Yeah.
And the point of cover for you. And being in the moment, being there, we're in this business, we're all instinctual. We want to run to the story to a certain degree. But it sounded like it was pretty quick when you realized there's a fine line between running for this story and running into trouble that could be really dangerous.
Right. And so at that point, I decided, like I said, let's just find the safest place possible. And at that point, you're just taking a guess. Because again, I didn't know where the gunfire was coming from. So I just picked a spot and said, that's going to be our spot, at least for now, just to get out from the middle of the street, just to get onto a sidewalk. And I could just hear the commotion and see it out of the corner of my eye, just peeking behind that wall that we were at. And I mean, it was all happening about a half block away. El Centro College was right there.
Yeah. After you hear that incredibly long barrage of fire, live fire going on, and you've said to myself, after you hear that long barrage of gunfire and you know it's coming from a gun, what is everybody saying around you? What are people shouting?
Run, run, run.
Just run.
Yeah, everybody sort of, anybody who was around there sort of giving people the heads up that there's gunfire. In case you didn't hear it, I don't know how you wouldn't have heard it if you were down there.
Right.
But just saying run, run, run. And I heard that from several people.
So you see people running. Did you see people who were completely confused?
Yeah. People that were confused, people that were separated from whoever it was that they were there initially with. So you had that confused look of like, where's my friend? Where's my loved one? Where's my whoever it is that they were down there with.
Right.
So there were a lot of people that just kind of trying to find whoever it was that they were looking for, friends, loved ones, in the middle of all of this. Meanwhile, we're hearing the gunfire, because it wasn't just a couple pops. I mean, it happened a bunch of times. So
when did you know that an officer had been hit?
We had gotten wind of some information on the scene. Some people, I heard them say it, but many times, and you know this, whenever there's sort of a high tense environment, a lot of people see things that maybe didn't happen the way that they think they saw it, or they heard something else. And so I don't know that I paid too much attention to the fact that an officer was shot. At first I heard there was an officer shot, and I said, okay, that's good to know that somebody's saying that. I'll verify that just as soon as I can.
Right.
That was my next option to do. So I had heard that. And then it was confirmed through some folks back here, back at the station. They relayed the information out to me because, again, I was kind of hunkered down by that wall. Yeah. I couldn't really go too far. And then they said, hey, Ken, we can confirm now one officer is dead. And then in the hours that ensued, followed 2 officers, 3 officers, 4, 5. And at that point, it just...
Sobering.
Oh, man. It hits you like a train.
Have you ever covered a story where you had to take cover while you were covering the story?
No, that was the first time. That was the first time. And we had to do it several times. I talk about that wall, and I remember that one because that's the first one we ran to. Mm-hmm. But there came a point where that was not a safe spot anymore either, and we had to, the photographer and I, Ed Lauder and I, had to run to several different spots. And I think there was another live shot a little later on in that night where we thought, again, we were at a safe spot, and that police officer, that police sergeant came up to us. We were live on the air.
I remember him pushing you.
And he said, don't be a target. If you can see them, they can see you. Don't be a target. That was his message. And that, again, was another reminder of the fact that we were caught in the middle of this. Typically, we respond to these incidents when they happen, and we cover them as best as we can.
And we're usually behind the police line, and you don't cross the tape.
So, but we found ourselves in the middle of it. It was an ongoing situation that we didn't know when it was going to have any sort of resolution. Every time we ran to a different corner thinking we were safe there, that would sort of only last a couple minutes before we realized we weren't safe there, and we had to go somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And that's how we spent, most of the night. Until about, I think 2 o'clock in the morning, things started to settle down. It wasn't over, but at that point they had the shooter pinpointed inside the El Centro College building. And so at that point we knew that the danger where it was at, where it was isolated. But up to that point, the entire downtown area is basically an active shooter scene. Yeah.
You work any situation like this, and invariably you're just a human being, but when you have a wonderful, talented photojournalist with you and they've got that big giant camera, you're often the epicenter of information when you're covering something that's live and unfolding. Yeah. I'm curious, how many people just came to you by virtue of the fact that you're a reporter and there was a how many people came to you by virtue of the fact that you were a reporter and they knew that because you had a camera with Ed standing right next to you, looking to you for information as to what the heck was going on?
There's a lot of people, because there were still a lot of people in the downtown area when this happened that stayed there, people who lived there. And people who just, for whatever reason, were sort of meandering about, not necessarily even attached to the march, that were just in the area, that once all of this thing happened, you just kind of got stuck in the area. Mm-hmm. There was nowhere to go, really. And there were a lot of people that were asking, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening? Is this over? What can you tell us? And I was surprised to see, in this day and age, especially of Twitter and social media and everything, I was surprised to see how few people actually knew the gravity of what was going on down there. I had to tell several people, we've got several police officers that have been shot and killed. And me telling them that was the first time they had heard that. And that happened a couple times that night, several times.
And they were trapped inside with you, hunkered down, and
Right.
couldn't leave at the moment.
The would-be perimeter, however
Yeah.
you know, the police want to describe that. But yeah, the actual area where this was taking place.
Right.
And they were stuck down there just like we were.
For people who were not there, I replay that video that we shared for the first time from Twitter on television, and I hear the rapid fire.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was almost like what you'd hear in a war to a degree.
Yep.
What does that sound like in the canyon of a downtown area like where you were? What does that sound like
Well,
there?
the most unsettling thing about that sound is that you don't know where it's coming from. Again, it sounded like it was all around you, and it was loud. And again, if you've ever fired a gun, if you've been near someone who's fired a gun before, out to the range, you know, a lot of people here in Texas have, you know that sound.
Yeah.
And you know that it's like you said, it's not fireworks, and it wasn't a car backfiring. And as a matter of fact, you know, the sort of succession of shots, you could tell that it was also something more than just a pistol that was being shot.
Right. And how you heard it and the level that you heard it, this wasn't something that was 8, 9, 10 blocks away.
Oh, it was close. Yeah, it was real close. Yeah. It was real close. And that's why we thought that it was coming from that parking garage that was directly in front of us. And that's why most of the police officers, that's exactly where they went to first.
It was one of the first places they went.
That they went to. And if you recall, there was a shot that we took live on the air of the police helicopter on the 4th floor, the light. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they were all focused on that area. And we thought at that point that that's where he was at. And I mean, we were directly underneath it. So, you know, that's why there was this sort of frightening moment where we had the lights shine on us. Mm-hmm. We didn't know where that light was coming from. And we thought maybe it was a sniper light that was shining on us. But yeah, we were directly underneath it. But it turned out to be just across the street from it at El Centro. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we were close and it was loud. And
well, we were on the air all night. I was sitting in here till 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. You were on the air out there. Fast forward to the end of the night, when police finally were able to begin pushing people out and getting them on their way to getting home or to wherever they were going to stay. What did you see then? What did it sound like? What were people saying when they were leaving, when it was finally over?
I distinctly remember late into the night, or early into the morning, when this was finally sort of lifted, just the fatigued look on officers' faces down there. There was one police officer, and he was a dark police officer. I could tell by the patch on his shoulder. He still had his gun drawn, his pistol drawn, but his posture, his demeanor, and just the look on his face was one of sorrow, was one of fatigue, and one of just confusion of what just had happened out there. And he wasn't the only one that looked like that. I think the police officers that were out there that night that held down this scene for as long as they did, knowing that their fellow officers were being killed and injured out there, you know, I'll never forget that. As far as the people that were still out there, I mean, they were still confused for a while. You know, that's not something you just sort of pick up and go about the rest of your morning or your evening. But the officers, I mean, that's an image that's going to stay with me for a long time. I mean, just seeing them look tired, seeing them look sorrowful for what had happened, and just noticing, you know, that they were feeling the pain.
Yeah. Heavy hearts, right?
Yeah, a lot of them.
What did you do when you went home?
I almost didn't want to go home. I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to go home. I felt like I needed to stay there until, I don't know. It didn't feel like it was over. When it was time to go, I didn't feel like it was time to go. And as soon as I went home, I didn't sleep all that day. I went home, took a shower, and I went back out there as soon as I could. Because I felt there was work that needed to be done out there.
Do you remember what time you went back out?
Yeah, it must have been about, I left, if I cleared around 4, I probably went back at about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I was back out there again. Mind you, I wasn't on shift again. My call until the night shift, so it wouldn't have been till 2:30 that really I was to report back to work. But I went back out there anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just those images over and over and over again, and you know, I'm thankful.
Have you ever covered a story like that before in your career?
No, and I hope I never have to. I hope I never have to. There was a lot of people afterwards, after they saw, you know, what they saw on air. You know, a lot of people came up and, you know, said, hey, you doing all right? I said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, you know, I had a scary night. I said, but you know, there were a lot of people, a lot more people that night that lost a whole lot more. you know, that really, you know, we should, you know, think of those folks. And of course, we're talking about the families of those officers. And I remember the last time it felt kind of like a debrief that I was doing with you, just kind of recapping from start to end. And that's kind of when I think that was the first time when I actually reported, you know, at this point we know 5 officers have been killed. And at that point, I mean, that is a very sobering thought. And it was almost difficult to say because, you know, you say to yourself, well, this can't be true.
Yeah. Not in our town.
Not in our town.
Right.
Not in our town and not here, but it was very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great recollection.
Yeah, man, I haven't talked about it that much in a really long time. Yeah, the gunfire, though, you know, you ask about that. The way that those buildings are set up out there, man.
Just the ricochet of
Dude,
the sound.
it's like it's all around you. It's like it's all around you. And I think that was the most unsettling part because, you know, you have like that fight or flight instinct that kicks in, you know, but
Sure.
but your audio is off. You know, you can't rely on that sense because it's off. You can't really tell. So you're just hoping that visually you can get to the nearest thing that looks safe and just kind of hunker down for a little bit. So,
yeah.
Yep, that was it.
It was great reporting, dude.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Cool.